Hey everyone, welcome back. We are diving deep today into a Reddit post that has everyone talking. This woman is feeling a bit lost in her relationship, and she turned to the internet for advice. One of those
Mhm.
"am I overreacting" kind of dilemmas.
And this one is really fascinating because it touches upon so many universal relationship themes. Intimacy, communication, uh, family dynamics, even the role of technology.
It really does. So let's get right to it. Here's the situation. A woman and her boyfriend just moved in together after like a year and a half of long distance.
Mhm.
She's feeling neglected, kind of like intimacy isn't a priority for him.
Mhm.
So to spice things up, she puts on some lingerie and she tries to initiate intimacy. And well, he chooses to play Call of Duty with his sister.
Ah,
Ouch, right.
this actually reminds me of what relationship researcher John Gottman calls bids for connection. It's these little moments where we reach out to our partners, right, for attention, affection, or validation. So in this case, her trying to initiate intimacy, yeah, that could be seen as a bid, but it seems like her boyfriend missed it, completely missed it.
That's a good point. And it makes you wonder, is he just oblivious or is there like something deeper going on?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting. She edited her original post, and she revealed that even when they were long distance, he would often be on a call with his sister while they were on a video chat. And sometimes he'd ignore her to focus on his game, straight up ignore her.
Okay, so maybe this isn't just a one-time thing. It seems like there's a pattern,
Mm.
of her feeling sidelined, whether it's the gaming or his sister. I have to admit, this is reminding me of those classic sitcom situations where the in-laws are always overstaying their welcome. But obviously, this is more nuanced than that.
Absolutely. And it raises some questions about boundaries and priorities in relationships. Where do we draw the line between staying close with family and nurturing our romantic relationships?
It's a tough one, especially since she says she doesn't want him to be disconnected from his loved ones.
Yeah.
But at the same time, something's definitely off. She's like constantly competing for his attention, not just with Call of Duty, but with his sister too.
It's a classic case of competing attachments. We all have important relationships, romantic partners, family, friends. And sometimes those relationships, yeah, they can create tension or conflict, especially when it feels like one is being prioritized over another.
So what can you do when you're in this kind of situation? Is it always the person who's feeling neglected that has to speak up?
That's where communication becomes so important. It's crucial to express your needs and feelings in a way that's clear and assertive, but without blaming or accusing your partner.
Okay, I hear you about communication,
Hmm.
but let's be real for a second, What if she's already tried and he's not receptive?
Yeah.
What if he just like dismisses her concerns or tells her that she's overreacting? Is it always on her to fix things?
You're right, you're right. Communication has to be a two-way street, you know what I mean? Both partners need to be willing to listen and empathize
Yeah.
and trying to see each other's perspective.
Right. Takes two to tango.
Hmm.
But even if they do both want to communicate, it can be tough to navigate these kinds of conversations,
Hmm.
especially if you're feeling hurt or insecure.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where seeking professional guidance can be really helpful. A therapist can help, you know? They provide a space that's safe and neutral for couples to talk about these sensitive issues and learn healthy ways to communicate and work towards a relationship that's more fulfilling, more balanced.
It's like having a relationship coach in your corner, helping you work through all the emotional obstacles. And speaking of guidance, I want to remind our listeners, you can find more of these deep dives, these insightful conversations on our YouTube channel, Shauna Palage. If you haven't already, go subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our new videos.
And of course, we love to hear from all of you here on Voices of the Soul. If this is resonating with you, leave a comment, share your thoughts. Your experience might help someone else who is, going through something similar.
Totally. It's all about creating a supportive community, compassionate, where we can all learn from each other's experiences. Now, back to that Reddit post. The comment section just exploded. So many reactions, so much advice. And some people, they were quick to jump to conclusions, suggesting maybe he's gay or in a secret online relationship.
It's fascinating how our minds like to fill in the blanks when we don't have all the information. But in this case, she did clarify things. She said that she actually knows his sister
Yeah.
and confirmed that was who he was gaming with. And she shut down those ideas about him being gay or involved with someone else.
It's a good reminder that it's important to stick to the facts. Avoid making assumptions or spreading rumors. But even though some of those comments weren't that helpful, it's clear that a lot of people did want to help her. They wanted to offer support, and advice.
For sure. And even with all the speculation, all the drama, there were some insightful comments that touched upon some really key relationship dynamics. For example, a lot of people pointed out that it was disrespectful, really disrespectful, for him to choose gaming over his girlfriend, especially when she made such a clear advance.
That's a great point. Even if he wasn't in the mood, there are ways to communicate that in a way that's respectful and loving without dismissing her feelings or ignoring them completely. It's about being present, attentive, responsive, even if that means putting your own desires on hold for a little bit.
Exactly. It all comes back to emotional attunement.
Yeah.
Basically, being able to recognize and respond to your partner's cues, their emotional cues.
Yeah.
That's crucial for building intimacy, trust.
So if he's constantly missing those bids for connection, if he's inattuned to her emotional needs, is a healthy relationship even possible?
That's the big question, isn't it? It's not about judging their relationship or labeling it as doomed or perfect. It's about understanding what's happening, what the dynamics are, and then helping our listener explore those possibilities, the challenges they might be facing in their own situation.
That's what we're here to do.
Right.
Provide insights, spark some conversations,
Mhm.
empower our listeners so they can make informed decisions about their lives and relationships.
And a few commenters made a really interesting observation. They suggested that maybe they're just sexually incompatible. It's something that's often overlooked, but it's an important factor.
You're right. We tend to shy away from talking about sexual incompatibility,
Yeah.
but it's a real thing, and it can manifest in all sorts of ways, like differing libidos, different preferences, for what kind of intimacy they want, or different levels of uh, adventurousness.
Right. And while it's normal for couples to experience some fluctuations in desire and activity, over time, if there's a big difference in libido or those fundamental differences in sexual preferences, then yeah, that can lead to problems: frustration, rejection, resentment, all of that.
So how do you know if it's just like a mismatch in libido
Oh.
or something more serious, like true sexual incompatibility? And how do you even start to talk about something like that with your partner?
It has to start with communication. A lot of communication. Open and honest. A willingness to be vulnerable with each other. Sometimes just acknowledging the differences and figuring out how to compromise, that can be enough.
But what if that's not enough? What if
Yeah.
you have like totally different desires, totally different needs when it comes to intimacy?
Well, that's when it might be time to seek professional help. A therapist or a sex therapist
Yeah.
who can help you explore all the options and make informed decisions about your relationship and its future.
And remember, there's no shame in getting help. It actually shows strength, a commitment to creating a relationship that's healthy and fulfilling.
Absolutely. And even if you decide that this relationship isn't the right fit for you, seeking professional help, yeah, that can equip you with some really valuable tools, insights that'll help you in your future relationships.
It's an investment in your own emotional well-being. Now, another thing that came up a lot in those comments was that maybe he just doesn't realize how important intimacy is to her. Some people were saying he might be clueless, oblivious, especially since they just made this big transition, from long distance to living together.
It's definitely possible that he's underestimating the impact of his actions,
Yeah.
on her emotional well-being. What seems obvious to one person, well, it can be totally missed by another,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to those emotional needs and desires.
Right. It's like that old saying, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Sometimes it feels like we're speaking completely different languages when it comes to like communication, emotional expression.
And while that's a little bit of an oversimplification, yeah, men and women can have different ways of processing and expressing their emotions. It's true.
So how do you bridge that gap in communication? How can you make sure you're really understanding each other's needs?
Open and honest communication. It all comes back to that. Don't expect your partner to read your mind. You have to express your desires clearly and respectfully. But also be ready to listen to their perspective, too.
But what if it feels awkward
Mm-hmm.
to express those desires or vulnerable, especially when it comes to, to intimacy? It can be hard to put yourself out there like that. Risk rejection.
Oh, I hear you.
Yeah.
It does take courage to be vulnerable, especially in a romantic relationship. But a good partner, a loving and supportive partner, they'll want to know how to make you feel loved, desired. And if they're not receptive, well, that's a red flag that something else is going on, something deeper.
Exactly. You deserve to be with someone who listens to your needs and then takes action to meet them. Now, back to that lingerie incident for a second. Some people want to say, oh, lingerie is so cliche. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no right or wrong way to show that you want intimacy. What matters is that it feels real to you, authentic. If lingerie makes you feel confident, sexy, then go for it. If it's, a romantic dinner that gets you in the mood or a heartfelt conversation, that's great too. The key is to find what works for you and your partner and to create an environment where you both feel comfortable expressing those needs, those desires.
I love that. Embrace your own unique style, right?
Right.
Find what really sparks that connection between you two. One thing that really stood out to me in her post was that they just went from long distance to living together. That is a huge transition.
Oh, absolutely. Long distance, that can create this kind of idealized version of your partner because you're
Mm.
mostly interacting through, screens, focusing on the positive, and you might even gloss over some of those everyday realities of living together.
Right. Then you move in and it's like, bam, dirty dishes, snoring, different sleep schedules. It can be a rude awakening.
So it's important to be realistic about the challenges. Going from long distance to living together, it takes patience, communication, and being willing to adjust to those quirks and habits.
And let's be honest, sometimes those habits can be annoying. It's one thing to miss someone snoring when you're miles apart. It's another to be woken up by it every night.
For sure. That's why communication is so important. You need to talk about those needs and expectations, openly, honestly, and without judgment, without resentment.
And it's okay to ask for help if you're feeling overwhelmed or you're not sure how to navigate this new phase. Don't hesitate to reach out to a therapist, a counselor. They can give you guidance, support as you adjust to this new life, this life together as a couple.
They can help you communicate, in a healthy way, set boundaries,
Hmm.
and work through the conflicts that just naturally come up when you're merging your lives together.
And speaking of conflicts, let's look at some of the specific challenges that she highlighted in her post. One comment that was particularly insightful suggested that his behavior might be passive-aggressive. Was he doing this intentionally? Ignoring her advances? Was this some kind of power game?
That is a really interesting angle. Because passive aggression can be so tricky, it often involves expressing anger or resentment indirectly.
It's like you're trying to crack a code.
Sure.
You know something is off, but you can't quite put your finger on it.
Exactly. And it's so frustrating for the other person, the one on the receiving end. It can leave you feeling confused, hurt, not sure how to address the issue because it's not out in the open.
So how do you know if you're dealing with passive aggression?
Yeah.
And what can you do about it?
Well, some common signs: procrastination, sulking, the silent treatment, making little digs that are disguised as jokes, or indirectly sabotaging plans. It's basically a way to express anger or resentment without actually having to confront the issue.
It's like a sneaky way to get your point across without actually having to say it.
Right. And it can be so damaging. It creates a lack of trust and blocks open communication.
So what can you do? What's the antidote to passive aggression? How can you break free from that kind of dynamic?
You got to bring those resentments out into the open, those hidden resentments. If you think your partner is being passive aggressive, you have to address it directly, but do it in a way that's calm and not confrontational.
So instead of saying you're being passive aggressive, try saying, hey, you seem withdrawn lately. Is something bothering you?
Exactly. Encourage them to share their feelings openly, honestly, and be ready to listen without judgment. And sometimes it can be helpful to get a therapist involved. They can help you have those conversations, and they can help you learn how to communicate in a way that's healthier.
Because let's face it, we all have those bad communication habits that we fall into. And sometimes you just need a little professional help to break them. And this Reddit post also touched on the issue of, digital distractions. The fact that he chose to play Call of Duty instead of, engaging with her. It's a pretty clear sign that technology is playing a role in their relationship.
Oh, absolutely. We're bombarded with digital distractions all the time. Social media, emails, text messages, video games. And while technology can be great for connecting, it can also be a huge barrier to intimacy if we're not careful.
It's like we're always plugged in, but sometimes we forget to plug into each other.
Exactly. We need to establish healthy boundaries around technology use in our relationships.
So what can we do? Do you have any practical tips for creating those boundaries?
One simple thing is to just designate, certain times or spaces, make them tech-free zones, like agree to put your phones away during dinner, or make a rule that you don't bring your devices into the bedroom.
I love that. It's about creating those sacred spaces, right?
Yeah.
Where you can really connect without all those notifications.
Right.
Distractions.
Right. And be mindful of how you're using technology when you are together. If you're constantly scrolling through your phone while your partner's trying to talk to you, it sends a message. And it's not a good one. It says that you're not really present or engaged.
You're there physically,
Yeah.
but mentally,
Yeah.
you're checked out. And that can be really hurtful.
Oh, yeah. So put your phone away, make eye contact, really listen to your partner. Those little things can make a big difference, for building intimacy and connection.
It's about being present
Yeah.
in the moment and savoring that time together. And speaking of the tenderness, I want to thank our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of relationships.
We're so grateful for this community. You're all so engaged and thoughtful. And if you're enjoying this conversation, be sure to subscribe to our channel and leave us a comment, sharing your thoughts, your experiences. We love hearing from you.
We believe everyone has a story to tell. And when we share those experiences, it helps us all learn and grow. So keep those voices coming. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, don't forget you can find more insightful conversations, more deep dives over on our YouTube channel, Chana Palaj.
We explore a wide range of topics, all related to personal growth, relationships, and the human experience.
So make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our new videos.
And if you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a rating and review. It helps other people find the show and join the conversation.
It's all about spreading the love, right? And the wisdom. Now, in our next segment, we're going to go even deeper into this post. Explore some of the other themes that came up in the comments. Sibling dynamics, the influence of medication, and the importance of self-awareness.
So stay tuned for more insights, more discussions. That'll get you thinking. So picking up where we left off, I think we should acknowledge another layer to this whole thing. She mentioned that both she and her boyfriend are on medication. That can affect libido.
Oh, that's a good point. We don't always think about that, the impact of medication on our well-being, physical and emotional.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to something as sensitive as intimacy.
Right. And medication can have so many side effects. And changes in libido, those are definitely not uncommon. So if you're noticing any changes, in your desire or your sexual function, talk to your doctor. It's really important.
And talk to your partner. It's easy to just internalize those changes and think something's wrong with you. But sharing those experiences with your partner, that can create understanding and prevent misunderstanding.
Absolutely. You got to create that space of empathy and support where you can both talk about these things, without shame or judgment.
Now, another thing in her post that really stood out to me was how she talked about his sister, her relationship with his sister. She said she felt like a sister herself in their interactions. And even his mother agreed with her.
That definitely adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it? It sounds like he's really close to his sister, maybe even blurring the lines a bit, between those sibling bonds and romantic ones.
It's like she's dating him and his sister. And to make things even more complicated, she said that he's pointed out similarities between her and his sister, like their personalities, their interests.
That makes you think about familiarity, attraction in relationships. Do we gravitate towards partners who remind us of our siblings? Or is this more about, him projecting that bond with his sister onto his girlfriend? Unconsciously, of course.
It's like he's trying to recreate that familiar feeling, that dynamic within his romantic relationship. But that can create problems if she feels like she's always being compared to his sister, or that she isn't being seen for who she is, her own unique qualities.
Right. Each person in a relationship, they need to feel valued, appreciated for who they are, not for how much they resemble someone else.
It's about celebrating those differences, those individual differences, and building a relationship on genuine connection, mutual respect. Not just because you happen to share a few interests or have similar personalities.
Now let's go back to that comment section for a minute. One commenter suggested that maybe his behavior is because of his attachment style. Maybe he has an avoidant attachment style, which can make people afraid of intimacy. And they tend to pull away emotionally when things get too close.
That's interesting. I've heard about attachment styles before, but could you break that down a little more? What does an avoidant attachment style look like in a romantic relationship?
Sure. People with an avoidant attachment style, they often have trouble with emotional closeness, vulnerability. They might seem independent, self-sufficient, but they're afraid of rejection, abandonment.
So they push people away to protect themselves from getting hurt.
Exactly. They might create distance by withdrawing emotionally, focusing on work or hobbies, avoiding those conversations about their feelings.
So in this case, his choosing video games over intimacy with his girlfriend, that could be a way of avoiding those emotions.
It's definitely possible. Of course, we can't diagnose him based on a Reddit post, but it's an interesting way to look at his behavior.
It makes you realize that maybe it's not that he's, intentionally being mean
Yeah.
or dismissive. Maybe it's more about him and his own struggles with intimacy.
Right. And this is why self-awareness is so important in relationships. Understanding your own attachment style and how it affects your behavior, yeah, that can be really helpful for working through conflicts and building stronger, healthier connections.
It's like having a user manual
Yeah.
for your own emotions,
Yeah.
for your patterns. So you can start to recognize those things, those triggers, and then you can figure out how to communicate your needs better.
And if you're in a relationship with someone who does have an avoidant attachment style, be patient, understanding they might need more space, more time to open up emotionally. And they might not express their feelings in the same way that you do.
Meet them where they are, right? Create that safe space, that secure space,
Yeah.
where they feel comfortable expressing themselves.
And sometimes it can be helpful to get some professional help, from a therapist who really understands attachment styles.
It's like having a translator to
Yeah.
help you understand each other's emotional language. And speaking of guidance, I just want to remind everyone that we are here for you, to support you on this journey of self-discovery and relationship building.
We explore a wide range of topics here on Voices of the Soul and over on our YouTube channel, Shauna Pelage. Personal growth, relationships, the human experience, you name it.
So if you're enjoying this conversation, please subscribe, leave us a comment, share your thoughts, your experiences. We'd love to hear from you.
Now, back to that Reddit post. One thing that kept popping up was this idea that she should try to meet him where he is. And some people took that to mean, engaging with him in the gaming world, maybe even joining him in Call of Duty, or just finding ways to connect with him through his interests.
That's an interesting approach. It could create a sense of shared experience, understanding.
I can see that. But I also have some reservations. While it's good to show interest in what your partner enjoys, their hobbies and stuff, you also have to maintain your own identity. Don't lose yourself in trying to please your partner.
It's about finding that balance between shared interests and individual passions. You don't have to become a gamer to connect with him.
Exactly. Ask yourself, am I really interested in this, or am I doing it for him? If it's the latter, yeah, it's not going to last.
And it could even lead to resentment if you feel like you're always sacrificing your own interests, your own needs.
Absolutely. It's about finding things you both enjoy that allow you to connect, in a meaningful way without one person feeling like they're always giving in or sacrificing their own happiness.
Another thing people kept saying was that she needs to set boundaries. They were pointing out that it wasn't okay for him to choose gaming over her, when she was trying to be intimate.
Yeah, this comes down to respect, consideration. Even if he wasn't feeling it in that moment, there are ways to communicate that without dismissing her or her feelings.
Right. It's about recognizing that your partner is their own person with their own needs and desires. And those need to be acknowledged, respected, even if they don't line up perfectly with your own in that moment.
And that's where boundaries come in. It's about protecting yourself. Physically, emotionally, mentally, defining what you're okay with, what you're not okay with in the relationship.
So she might need to set some boundaries around his gaming, especially when it's getting in the way of their connection and their intimacy.
Right. And setting boundaries, it's not about controlling him or being demanding. It's about communicating your needs clearly, respectfully, letting him know what you will and will not tolerate.
Creating that dynamic where both of you feel safe, respected, and like things are balanced.
And if he's not willing to respect those boundaries, well, that's a big red flag. Something isn't right.
It means he might not be valuing you or your well-being.
One commenter pointed out something about the timing of it all. When she tried to initiate intimacy, she waited hours after the Call of Duty thing to confront him. And by then, the moment had passed. It was awkward, forced.
That's a good point. It is hard to know when to bring things up, those sensitive topics.
Yeah.
Especially when you're feeling hurt or vulnerable. How do you have those conversations?
Well, you have to balance, giving yourself time to process your emotions, but also addressing the issue before it becomes a bigger problem, creates resentment. So if something happens that upsets you, talk to your partner sooner rather than later.
But what if you don't know what to say in the moment? What if you need time to cool down first? To think.
Totally. You can always say, hey, I'm a little overwhelmed right now. Can we talk about this later? When I've had a chance to think about it.
Give yourself permission to pause. Come back to it when you're ready, when you can express yourself clearly.
Exactly. And when you do have that conversation, try to use I statements, to express how you're feeling, what you need. Instead of saying, you always choose gaming over me, say something like, I felt hurt, neglected, when you chose to play Call of Duty instead of spending time with me.
Own your feelings, your experiences. Don't blame your partner.
Right. And be specific about what you need from your partner. Say, I'd really appreciate it if you could put your phone away and give me your full attention when we're together.
Be clear, direct,
Mm.
but not demanding or controlling.
You know what really got to me in her post? Was when she said she felt humiliated, having to ask him about it later, hours later. It's clear that she felt rejected, like she didn't matter. And her trying to initiate intimacy, yeah, that totally backfired. And she was left feeling hurt.
I know. It's sad. It makes you wonder if he even realized, how much it affected her emotionally.
That's why communication is so important. We think our partners just know how we feel, but they don't. Not unless we tell them.
It's like we expect them to be mind readers, and then we get disappointed when they're not.
Right. Be vulnerable. Express your feelings, even if it feels weird, awkward.
And remember, being vulnerable isn't weak. It actually takes a lot of strength, courage. It's brave to put your heart out there, risk getting hurt.
It's true. And when you are vulnerable with your partner, that's when you can really connect on a deeper level.
Now, in the next part of this deep dive, we're going to talk about some of the tougher stuff, like those suggestions that maybe he's gay or that he's in a secret online relationship. We'll also talk about self-care, self-compassion, when you're feeling unappreciated in a relationship.
Stay tuned for more.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive. We've been talking about all sorts of things, attachment styles, technology's impact on intimacy, but we still have some loose ends to tie up.
Yeah, it's like we're putting together a big puzzle, looking at each piece to see how it fits into the whole picture of their relationship.
Exactly. And one piece that keeps coming up is the idea that maybe he's gay or in a secret online relationship. Now, remember, she did clarify that she knows his sister and that it was actually her he was gaming with. But this whole thing, it makes you think about trust and communication.
When we're feeling insecure or neglected, our minds can go to some pretty dark places, We start doubting our partners, questioning their motives, even if there's nothing to back it up.
Our insecurities can tell us all kinds of stories. And sometimes those stories, they just take over.
And that can be so damaging to a relationship if you don't deal with it in a healthy way.
So what can we do when those doubts start creeping in? How do you stop them from poisoning the relationship?
Well, first, just acknowledge the feeling. Don't judge yourself for it. It's normal to feel insecure sometimes or jealous, especially if you've been hurt before.
Yeah.
Or if your partner is, doing something that triggers those feelings.
It's about recognizing that those feelings are real, but they don't necessarily mean that something is wrong.
Right. Then you have to talk to your partner. Tell them how you're feeling, but in a way that's calm, open. No accusations, just express your concerns, ask for reassurance.
Hey, I'm feeling a little insecure about this. Can we talk about it?
Exactly. And if they're really invested in the relationship, they'll listen, they'll validate your feelings, and reassure you that they love you, that they're committed to you.
But what if they don't? What if they get defensive? Or they dismiss you? Or they won't even acknowledge your concerns?
Well, then that's a problem. That's a red flag. It could mean they're not prioritizing your needs or respecting your feelings.
And it might be time to take a step back and think about whether the relationship is really working for you.
Now, besides communication, self-care is so important, especially when you're feeling insecure or neglected. It's easy to get caught up in trying to please your partner or fix the relationship, but you can't forget about yourself. Your own well-being matters too.
You know that saying, put your own oxygen mask on first? Same idea.
Exactly. Take care of yourself, physically, emotionally, mentally. Do things that make you happy. Spend time with people who support you.
Yeah.
Pursue your own interests. The things you're passionate about.
Remind yourself that you are worthy of love and happiness, no matter what, whether you're in a relationship or not.
And that brings us to something else that came up in those comments. She should just dump him. move on. Now, it's easy to say that when you're not the one in the relationship, but it's not that simple.
Right. You can't just say dump him. It's more complicated than that.
Of course. Ultimately, it's her decision whether to stay or go. Weigh the pros and cons, think about what she needs, what her values are, and decide if the relationship is worth saving, if it's worth fighting for.
Ask yourself those tough questions. Am I happy? Are my needs being met? Do I feel loved, respected?
And if the answer is no, then maybe it's time to walk away.
Remember, you have the power to choose. What's best for you? You don't have to settle.
Sometimes walking away is the best thing you can do for yourself.
It's about knowing your worth
Mm.
and making space for a relationship that will bring you joy, fulfillment.
You know, one thing that really struck me about those comments was how supportive they were. So much empathy for her, even though she was sharing something so personal, so vulnerable with strangers on the internet. She was met with kindness, understanding.
It reminds you that even in this crazy world, this online world, there are people who care.
It shows that we're not alone in our struggles. There are people out there who will listen, offer support, remind us that we deserve love, that we belong.
Sometimes that's all you need. Someone to listen, a kind word, to know you're not going through it alone.
So, to our listener who shared this post, thank you for being so vulnerable, for trusting us to talk about this with you. We hope this conversation has been helpful, maybe even given you a new way of looking at things, in your own relationships.
And remember, you're not alone. We're here to support you, offer guidance, insights, and a safe space to talk about all of this, the messy stuff, love, intimacy, all of it.
If you've been enjoying these deep dives, please subscribe to Voices of the Soul. And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, Shauna Pelage, for even more conversations like this. We explore all sorts of things, personal growth, relationships, the human experience.
And keep those voices coming. Share your thoughts, your experiences, your questions. We're all in this together, learning, growing, and figuring out this crazy thing called life and love.